Today's presentation is around the lesson that we have learned at Axiad deploying YubiKeys in the enterprise. So the first thing is I'm not going to spend time explain the issue with password. I think it's well understood now, and I'm not going to cover it today. So I think the real situation we're seeing at most enterprise customer we're talking to is not should I implement multi-factor authentication, but more which multi-factor authentication solution I should deploy. And actually, in a lot of cases, organizations already have one and sometimes more than one solution already deployed. So today we'll talk more about different solutions out there, and specifically the YubiKeys, and I'll explain on this slide why we see a significant adoption of YubiKey as the authentication devices of choice for higher trust environment. So the challenge today around authentication is there are multiple. One of them, password, painful, costly, and secure. Let's move on past that. The second one, there's still this perception that security is something that will impact the end user, right? That you need to balance security and ease of use and make sure that the user experience remain good, but it's difficult to achieve with higher security product. The truth is that's not the case anymore, and we'll elaborate on that. A second important point is that not all authentication methods are as secure or are equivalent, right? So we talk about password. SMS has already been flagged as unsecure, and NIST has removed it for the list of approved strong authentication methods. And one method that we see significant adoption today is leveraging the mobile phone with some kind of apps that do push notification typically. And so this is really becoming more and more the standard for multi-factor authentication. And this is great. We deploy this solution with our customers. That works fine. The user experience is great, and there is an improvement in security compared to password. However, a mobile phone itself is not a secure platform. So these mobile apps can be hacked into, they are vulnerable to malware. And as they are becoming more and more prevalent, we can expect attacks to move from trying to, harvest password and attack password to look at how do I go and circumvent the security solution of such a mobile authentication platform. So mobile authentication is great, but it's not good enough for a number of specific use cases. So on the good news side, what we're seeing today is that you have easy-to-use strong authentication solution out there with higher level of security. That's really where we see a lot of traction for the YubiKey. So the key things regarding the YubiKey is that, which come in different flavor, but the key things to remember is one, and that's really what a key starting point. It's based on a secure device, right? It's like the same type of technology you see in your bank card today, where you've got this golden chip on top of your card. Same idea. You've got a secure chip. All the cryptographic material are on the chip. It's very difficult to hack this. And today I'm not aware of any organization having managed to hack into that type of security. So it's based on hardware security. And publicly cryptographic, so it's highly scalable. Another, maybe even more important use point here is the fact that it's supporting multiple authentication standards. And here that's important to understand. Today, in the enterprise, you don't have one standard that will enable you to move away from password and replace every password with the same authentication method. The truth is you've got multiple. And each of these authentication protocol or authentication standard have their benefits and strengths, and also their limitation. So I will list, for example, FIDO2, which is the latest, and address a lot of the shortcomings of previous authentication solution. But the problem with FIDO2 today is that it's brand new. It's only available on a limited number of applications. So Microsoft, for example, is doing a big push, but it's on Windows 10. And only the latest version of Windows 10. So it's not yet there. So supporting it is a plus, but it's not, if you only go with the FIDO2 approach, you're not going to be able to address your enterprise use case. U2F, previous generation of FIDO, Same thing, supported by a number of applications, but not widely supported across your enterprise. Smart card and PKI tend to have a bad press today, but the truth is they have been widely deployed, especially in the US government. And they are the best way to authenticate to your machine, to your endpoint. I mean, the only strong authentication today on Windows, outside of Windows 10, is using PKI and supported by smart cards. So the fact that a YubiKey gives you that functionality with this very simple user experience of putting it in, pressing a button, maybe entering a PIN, is really great if you want to address the issue of logging to your Windows machine or logging to your Active Directory and so on, as well as Mac and other platforms. Also, the great thing with smart card is because the US government has standardized around what's called the PIV card, you've got a lot of applications that support it by default. So you can do PKI authentication for most VPN out there, firewall, application, even printers. Additionally, because it's PKI, you can do additional use case like signing and encrypting message. And the last one, which is also the first one in terms of sequence, the oldest one, I would say, is one-time password. So one-time password is something that, for example, the RSA token, the secure ID token, is using. Today, there is a standard called OAuth, which is widely accepted and supported in the industry. And with OAuth, it's great for any remote access use case. You can do, supported by all, VPN, and so on. Also, most of the authentication server that you use with OTP and OAuth have SAML or OpenID integration. So you can do OTP authentication against not only a remote access, but also a lot of web-based application. And when you cover all these use cases, on one device, you can do both FIDO, PKI, and OTP, then you have a much larger coverage in terms of the application. You can replace password and go with strong authentication. So that's, the key value of the YubiKey. Now, we are seeing a lot of our customers that have started or looking at YubiKeys. We see a lot of interest there, but we also see, we've learned over the past few years working closely with Yubico and their customer, some of the pain points. The first one is device management. So if you are starting to assign this secure device, this YubiKey, to users, you all need to think about what are going to be the emergency access scenario or the account recovery scenario. What happens when the device is lost, it's stolen, or you don't know where it is? So you need to be able to manage these scenarios. You need to know who has which device at what time, and maybe someone keep having more and more devices. It may be suspicious. So the management of this device, especially if you want to enable your users to have a bit more control them in terms of enrolling themselves in the system, changing their PIN, maybe changing the certificate if they do PKI, you need what's called a device management system or a credential management system, especially if you want to do it at scale. If you have large deployments, it's impossible to do it just with the basic manual tools that Yubico would provide you. So that's one. The second one, and it's kind of linked to this multi-protocol aspect I was talking about earlier. In order to enable these different use cases, you need certain components. So here on this diagram, what I'm showing on the left side is kind of the use cases, right? On the top, these are, when you get this device, you want to enroll them. So I'm a user, received my YubiKey, I want to enroll it in the system so that I can start using it to log into my machine and so on. So the enrollment, as well as the management of this device, if I've lost it or if I want to replace it or so on. So the device management we just talked about. In the middle is really the use cases. You want to log into a different machine, you want to log into your directory, you potentially want to also do email signature and encryption. And at the bottom is, first one, on-prem users, second one is remote users. So these are more like logging into your VPN, logging into your extranet, and so on. In the middle, typical IT corporate infrastructure. Won't go into that. Then on the gray side, on the right side, I'm going to show you, what are the components you need. So as we talked about on the very first slide, one of the oldest technology in terms of authentication, but still probably one of the most widely used today is OTP based on oath. So if you want to use that functionality on the YubiKey to be able to do remote access, log into your VPN, log into web-based application, you are going to need an authentication server or an authentication service. It's either or. Today the trend is more going for an authentication service, but you still have option to do it on-site if you want to. So that's one, right? The device has an OTP secret. It needs an OTP secret on the server. That's what this server is about. It validates your authentication request and then give you access to whatever application you are requesting. The second element is on the PKI side. So to do PKI and use this, especially this logging to Windows and logging to Microsoft AD, you'll need a CA, which is a certification authority, which is this PKI credential, will manage a PKI credential, issue it to each of the user, manage the validity of this certificate and so on. So that's another element. Typically a certificate authority, because it includes key secrets, need to be protected by what's called a hardware security module or HSM. Once you start using PKI for authentication, you probably are going to have also to deploy PKI credential on your phone, because most users not only use a laptop, but also a phone. So the MDM element is also important. How do I deploy these certificates on the phone? So you see, when you start looking to enable the PKI use cases, you will need these three components. Same way as for the OTP, you have also the option of going with a cloud certificate authority. The additional value, by the way, with the cloud certificate authority is that you can take one that is publicly trusted. So if you want to have certificates that are trusted outside of the boundary of your enterprise, a lot of the cloud CAs do that. You can also do it with on-prem CA, but it's extremely costly and time-consuming. And then the last piece is, if you have used devices, you need the credential management system, right? So to address the use cases we have on the left. So that's kind of the complexity. If you want to enable these three protocols, if you want to deploy this device at scale, you need all this additional infrastructure. Typically, can be 3 or 4 or sometimes 5 different vendors addressing this. Third pain point we're seeing is that, and that's one that people are getting increasingly aware, is user authentication is only one part of the problem. First thing is, when you look at it, you need different level of user authentication. What we call privileged user is higher trust users, so typically users that would need a YubiKey or a smart card, if that's a form factor they like. So this, we're talking here not only about your sysadmin, who obviously have great level of privilege, but anyone that is involved with critical information in your enterprise. So probably HR, finance, your R&D teams that's working on the next generation of whatever great product you guys are building or service. But then you have the non-privileged users, which may be people within your enterprise that don't have the same level of access. Maybe they are partners, maybe they are contractors. And so you need to be able to support both, because in both cases, you should not use password. You need to use MFA, but maybe not the same MFA type of credential for each of them, because the level of risk is not the same. So different approach there. Non-privileged users, for example, is typically a very good use case for phone-based authentication. So you need to be able to address that. But then what we're seeing, and it's increasing in importance and demand, is it's great to know who your users are that are accessing your corporate resource, but there are more and more non-users or non-person entities. This can be applications, servers, machine, devices that are connecting to your network. All of these entities need to be trusted because they're accessing information, they are interacting with your ecosystem, and if a rogue entity start connecting and getting information, it creates risk for you. So when you look at an authentication solution, you need to cover all of these different use cases. If not, you will only end up with a silo. And that's really what we're seeing today. In a lot of customer engagement, we go there, and as I said earlier, customers already have some kind of authentication solution in place. In a lot of cases, they have multiple authentication solutions in place, and it becomes complex to manage, complex to upgrade, complex to evolve, especially on the PKI side. With the IoT use case, there is more devices, there is more applications that need to be protected, and it requires skills that typical IT departments do not have. So patchwork of disconnected solution with gaps, cost, And this all results in a lower security because this disconnected solution, at the gap between each of them, you have some risk. Now, good news, Axiad Cloud, which is the product that Axiad is selling or is building, address all of these challenges. So I'm not going to go in great detail there, but as you can see on this slide, one, we support different types of authenticators, so we can address non-privileged use case as well as privileged use cases. We include a fully hosted certificate authority, so we can address the identities for machine and devices use cases. There's an option if you need to be connected to public PKI or trusted CA, so that, for example, if you do business with the US government, or if you do business with Safe Biopharma, for example, which is one of these public CAs or standard, you can connect to that. And of course, it includes all the access because authentication is important, but authentication to the application you want to get into are significant. So if we go back to the diagram we were showing earlier, instead of having this patchwork of solution in the gray box, you have now one entity, one platform with multiple options, so you can deploy and add things as you go that address all the use cases and enable all the potential authentication protocols that the YubiKey can provide you. Great simplification. I'll end up with an example. So this customer of ours, which is a manufacturer of control system, part of their business is dealing with the US DoD, Department of Defense. So they have to comply with this NIST mandate called 800-171. That's contractual requirement to do business with the Department of Defense today. They loved the YubiKey. The IT department had used them for small projects over the past couple of years. So they said, that's great. The user experience is excellent. Our users love it. We're going to go and deploy it at scale, 13,000 people. They bought the devices, started deploying. After a couple of months, they deployed 100, and they started to realize that it was not going to work the way they were doing it because they were using, the default tools that YubiKey was providing. They were using, spreadsheets to know who was having which device, and the deployment, the issuance of the device was just not scaling. So we get in touch with them. We started discussing in October of last year, so October 2018, and within 2 months there, we captured all their requirements. The cloud stack was up and running, and we had 1,000 users deployed. Since then, as of today, I think we have 7,000 of the 13,000 users deployed, and they are now looking at the international part of the deployment, which add a number of complexities there, but making very good progress. So in terms of use case, using these keys to authenticate to the machine, so Windows and Mac, authenticate for VPN for remote users. They are pushing certificate on the phone with Microsoft Intune as the MDM for device authentication. The single sign-on or getting access to application is done through an ADFS connector, so they are leveraging Microsoft ADFS. They also had non-privileged users. They had a legacy authentication server on premises, which was replaced as part of this project, and now they're using their phone or YubiKeys, depending on the profile of the user, to address some of this OTP scenario. And they've just started recently to also deploy PKI for their non-personal entity, so domain controllers, Wi-Fi access point, and always-on VPN. So the migration, they get rid of 3 different systems, moving to the cloud, resulting in a reduced cost, much less constraints and stress for the IT department because now it's cloud-based, and we provide high level of service to support them. So the result for them, especially the CISO, was peace of mind. So key takeaway we want you guys to take from this presentation: make sure that when you select a solution, it addresses all the different authentication/identity use case. 2, make sure that it's not only easy to deploy, but also to manage. A lot of vendors will talk to you about how frictionless the solution is from an end-user standpoint, but I think it's even more important that the IT administration team also has a very seamless experience to deploy and maintain it. And then the last point is, once we achieve this, user adoption, IT, being able to maintain and evolve the solution, you will have a CISO that gets peace of mind. Result is achieved, audit is passed, cost is under control, and great result for everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me by email or call me at this number. I'll be more than happy to take any question and discuss this in more detail. I appreciate your time, everyone, and have a good day.